In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. I know some of you were impatient this week. We had a lot of people asking, where's the podcast? Where's the podcast? It is a later game this week, the Monday Labor Day game. So we are recording Thursday night. We got a ton of stuff to talk to you about, including why we record so late in the week. And I will get to that. But we got to address the top performer of the week, Jamal Peters, the top performer of the month, Wynton McManus. We've got comments from former Mayor David Miller. There's the Eric Sutton fine. Plus, we've got our usual assortment of injury report news, OCDC, one thing, prediction, fantasy advice, picks, and our halfway point power rankings. All that more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. JB, people are upset this week because they went to their podcast app Wednesday morning and there was no X's and Argos podcast. So I do think we have to explain to the good people how the schedule works. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it, but generally, most weeks we do record Tuesday night because generally Tuesday is the first official day of practice. And this week being a little different, today, Thursday, was the first official day of practice. So that's when the Argos are really actually legitimately practicing, not just going through a walkthrough. You get to see sort of who's dressed, who's not. And so in order to bring you the most accurate, the most up-to-date information we possibly can, this seemed like the best day to record for a Monday podcast. But that said, we're glad that you can't wait for the podcast. That's awesome. It's better than having you not care at all or not notice. So thank you to those of you who asked where the podcast is. Here it is. You found it. You were listening to it. All right, let's get to it, JB. Jamal Peters, top performer of the week honors. Not really surprising after the huge game he had last week. I don't know if I remember an Argos DB. There have been certainly, but I was having a tough time recalling when the last time was that an Argos DB had such a dominant game. 3 interceptions, taking one back, 67 yards for a touchdown, 4 tackles. It was a huge game from Jamal Peters, so that's very well deserved.
Yeah, definitely. He is an up-and-coming star, and, he really flashed out.
It's funny you say that, too. Like, you think about how the Argos found this gem in Jamal Peters. The first I ever really took note of him, because I remember in the offseason that lasted forever, we signed so many defensive backs, and every time they'd sign someone, I'd watch some film, make some notes. Jamal Peters, nothing really stood out to me too much. Watching him at Mississippi State, he looked fine, but he wasn't particularly fast. He did get beat a lot in man coverage. His size was great, but it just wasn't. I didn't actually think he would turn into anything. I think originally I didn't even think he would make the team. There were a lot of other names I was looking at, but I remember Coach Bell, the first time I talked to him, he asked me, he's like, have you watched Jamal Peters? I'm like, yeah. He's like, watch Jamal Peters again, because he already was impressed with something that he saw in Jamal Peters. And I think part of it is the Argos scheme certainly helps him, because he's not terrific in man coverage. He ran a 4.63, I think it was, was that the combine? That was a pro day. And, he doesn't necessarily have the speed to keep up in tight man coverage with someone that runs a 4.3 or a 4.4. But first of all, in the CFL, you don't have a ton of those guys. And the Argos defense is largely zone-based. And he's such a nuisance in zone because he's so long, right? Like, he stands 6'2", his wingspan is massive. And he's just got this great ability to read the ball in the air. And so it's almost impossible to get it by him. The most annoying in terms of playing against him is when he's got flats, because the way the Argos play the flats, they really back out, and he doesn't actually have to get in that tight to the guy sort of curling in or hooking in or running it out behind him in order to get in the way of that ball. And so that allows him to still close on those short routes. I think a lot of the stuff they do on defense is successful because of him. But I get why other teams didn't pick up on him, just like I didn't when I watched the film. But you have to again hand it to the Argos scouts for finding this guy when seemingly no one else did, and they've done that time and time again with a lot of the Americans they brought in and a bunch of the Canadians that they've been drafting over the last few years.
Yeah, the secondary has been probably their overall strongest unit in the last 2 years. They have good games and bad games like anybody, but on the whole, they're well coached. They're aggressive. They're athletes out there making plays. It has been really one thing that the Argos have been able to count on is having a pretty good secondary most weeks.
I finally got to ask Jamal Peters about the story that I told last year when I went out to a freezing cold practice. I think it was -6 or something like that. And Jamal Peters was the only player out there in shorts. And I remember thinking it was such an odd thing because I knew he played at Mississippi State, and I had to look up, what's the farthest north he had ever played a football game. And between high school and college, the farthest north before coming to the CFL was Arkansas. And so I had a chance to ask him after the game last week about that and say, is that true? Is that like really the coldest it's ever been for you, in a football game is Arkansas? And he's like, yeah, like I thought that was cold, and then I came to the CFL and I asked him about the shorts incident. And he said he wanted to prove to the other guys that he could handle it, that he wasn't going to be afraid of playing up here in the cold. So he wore his shorts, but only once. So that's I thought that was a kind of a fun resolution to a fun story.
Yeah, and you can tell. He talked about he played some linebacker in high school. He played a little bit of wide receiver in university. Coaches recognize, that he is an elite athlete, and they want him on the field, and are willing to try him in different places. So I think that speaks to his. I know his measurables are not off the chart, but I think the fact that he has played a couple of different positions suggests that coaching staffs recognize that he is an elite player who can help them.
Yeah, he's just a nuisance in the secondary, and he's in the perfect system for it, like we said. Let's move on to Wynton McManus. So, Player of the Month honors, that's quite something. Top performer for the month of August, Wynton McManus. Not really surprising, and it's the consistency. That's what earns you these Player of the Month honors. You have a huge game like Jamal Peters we just talked about. You're going to get Player of the Week a nod, but to be a Player of the Month takes that consistency. Can't just be one huge spike and then 3 okay games. Listen to these numbers over the month of August. 33 tackles. This is over 4 games, by the way, right? 33 tackles, 3 special teams tackles, a sack, a forced fumble. And at this point now in the season, Wynton McManus leads the CFL in total tackles, 76, total defensive plays with 85. He's got 3 sacks in there, an interception that he returned 50 yards for a touchdown. He's got a pass knockdown, 3 tackles for a loss. Over a 10-game period, he's having not just a great month of August. Wynton McManus is having an amazing season, and I would say that he is the best will linebacker in the CFL this year. And I know Cameron Judge has been playing great out in Calgary. I know you've got to always respect Simone Lawrence in Hamilton. I'm telling you, Wynton McManus is having the best season of all of them.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this the other day, as one does, I guess. I think he is the Eastern nominee for Defensive Player of the Year. I think that he has been unbelievably consistent with occasional flashes of stardom, and he has been an unbelievable free agency signing. And he has brought a energy and a commitment to aggression to the Argos defense, but not in the way, like, not over the edge as a couple of guys do, which I don't mind. But his is kind of like, he's not Mwamba, who is like solid. He has a little more edge than Mwamba, but he's not, except for the shoe throwing. He has been absolutely the best player on the Argos defense every snap of the year. I think that if he can keep this up, I don't know who could be better defensively for him in the East. I really don't, in terms of consistency and making huge plays. And obviously he took care of business in Halifax when they were playing Saskatchewan. I think he's right there.
I do too, but I don't know if he has enough highlights to do it. And it shouldn't be about that. That shouldn't matter, but it always does. And I think it's tough when you're going up against guys that are registering a ton of sacks, or guys that are registering a ton of interceptions. Although that said, I think Jamal Peters is now tied for the CFL lead in interceptions with 4. So I just think it's something like that for Wyndham McManus. He goes out and does a very workmanlike job every week, and it's not necessarily something that jumps off the screen to people watching. So I don't actually expect that. I think he deserves it and should at least be in the conversation. I'm not sure he is right now. And maybe it's going to take Toronto wrapping up the East and really dominating down the stretch for other people to notice. His stats certainly do it. You see him at the top of the tackle board. That should do it. But watching him play week in, week out, he just doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And he's so solid. And next to Mwamba, they just managed to take away so much of what the opponents want to throw at you. It just limits the other team's offense. Like some of the defensive categories that the Argos do really well in have a lot to do with the play of Wyndham McManus. Like, for example, the Argos are the number 1 team in the league in terms of not allowing touchdowns once the team's into the red zone. Stuff like that is where those linebackers really do tighten up, and there's a lot less space down there. And that's when they start taking away the run game. That's when they start clamping down on running backs getting out of the backfield. And so, yeah, it's of huge value. The Argos defense is a very good defense. And yeah, he's pretty... Is he unquestionably the leader of it? I guess he is.
I think so. I think he... I mean, I don't unquestionably. I mean, I think, obviously, Mwamba has been an amazing signing and has been a pillar in the middle of the field. But I think McManus has a juice that the other guys on the team don't have. He has an electricity. You can see it in him. He is a leader. And I'd love to see them, scheme up a few more sacks to give him, a little more statistical push, because I do believe at this point, sort of midway, he is the Eastern Conference Defensive Player of the Year.
Earlier today, Toronto Mayor, or former Toronto Mayor, David Miller, took to Twitter to express his outrage at the Argos leaving BMO Field a mess, apparently. And I want to vent about this a little bit. So let me just read the tweet, and there were responses to it, and it just got into a huge mess of conversations with Argos fans responding, TFC fans responding. So former Mayor David Miller says, "Amazing how much damage the CFL does to a soccer pitch. TFC's new Italian stars must be shocked." And Richard Petty quote tweeted a response, and he said, "Before I retired, MLSE considered buying Argos. I presented to board 4 reasons why they shouldn't. One was that it was a natural turf soccer pitch and CFL football would destroy it. Today, they're hurting a franchise worth more than $800 million for one valued at maybe $10 million." JB, initial thoughts on this?
Well, look, he's not wrong. TFC is the older sibling. TFC is worth a lot of money. The Argos are not to MLSE. But he's wrong. I mean, he's just wrong. The Argos don't practice on the field. They play 9 games, 9 at home. The last game they played was on a gorgeous day. They didn't play in the rain, didn't play in the mud, they didn't tear the field up. And most NFL teams, which would dwarf any money that TFC makes, have, 50,000 people in to watch a country music concert the night before the game. They have hundreds of events over the course of a football season at NFL stadiums all across America. And, nobody weeps tears for the poor NFL teams. They just go about their business. And those businesses are real businesses, not Major League Soccer business. And, the Argos playing on the field didn't cause TFC to give up the 89th minute goal again. Their inability to have a backline defender and really not very good coaching from Bob Bradley and not really very good team construction from their general manager is resulting in a non-playoff season again for TFC. So I think if the field is what they're worrying about, then they have bigger issues to conquer.
There are so many soccer teams in North America who play on a field, as you said, that is used more than 9 times by a football team, and on natural grass fields. It's all over. Like, I actually started looking it up because I was going to respond with a list of soccer teams that deal with far worse than what he's complaining about. And immediately I recognized that there are too many. We're talking about hundreds here. This is not something I can put into a tweet.
Of course they do. In North America, you know how many soccer teams have a soccer-only stadium? I mean, it's ridiculous.
And like you said, it's not like it was a factor this week. The Argos, like we were there. We were at the game. It was a dry day. The field had been watered and taken care of. The field was not left in a mess. Now, it rained several days after that. Maybe that contributed. I don't know. It had nothing to do with the Toronto Argonauts. And even if it did, that's what happens sometimes. Soccer games played in terrible rain conditions are also going to tear up the field. So David Miller is in the wrong on this, and shame on Richard Petty as well for jumping on.
It's such a minor part. Look, I am a soccer fan. I'm a TFC fan. They're not particularly good right now, and the field is not the reason. And to kind of come up with that as a problem is preposterous when 90% of the league is playing in multi-purpose stadiums.
Toronto DB Eric Sutton was fined for his groin punch. This is probably not a long debate for you and I. Correctly fined for the punch in the groin?
Well, I know that McLeod had said in his press conference the week prior that it was time for the Argos to sack up. And, maybe he just really took that to heart.
Yeah. It's... You have to be fined for that. It's a movie. You don't want to see that in a game. You don't want to see people getting hit in the groin. It's just not in all seriousness, it's not a good thing.
If you're a special teamer, you can't risk what could have been, like really a game-changing moment. You have them pinned, you have the momentum, and then suddenly you give them half a field, and now we're down a player. Look, McManus threw a shoe, but he's McManus. He can do the occasional thing like that. You're a special teamer. You cannot be getting penalties, of that variety or of that stupidity, to be honest.
Special teamer and a rookie at that. And so hopefully he can learn from this and never make that mistake again. If this kind of thing repeats itself and we find ourselves talking about something like this in a few weeks' time, then I think there's a good chance he's not going to be around for that long. Because like you said, that you don't last when you... unless you're Wynton McManus or Chris Edwards or somebody who's making week to week contributions that are more than just solely on special teams, then you have to make sure that you don't make mistakes like this.
They might have thrown Chris Edwards out of the league if he had done that. He's such a magnet for heat. You could just see the referees. I watched it at the game. Like as soon as they look at him, they have their hand on the flag. He's such a magnet. He's such a heat magnet. I'm telling you, Chris Edwards gets suspended for a game. Guaranteed that happens.
I hope not. But I see what you're saying. Like you pointed out to me in the press box last week, we were watching just the way in which the officials not only deal with him, but they've always got their eye on him. They're always tracking him around the field. Waiting
for him to say something, to do something. And look, he's earned that. And he's in their books, and he's got to get off their radar. But it is, I'm going to defend him.
We've made a mess of power rankings on many occasions. Our last set of power rankings wasn't bad. It's actually held up throughout this span of 4 or 5 weeks now. But there has been a lot of change. We've seen Nathan Rourke become injured and probably no longer going to be playing for the BC Lions. We'll see how that works out. It is possible he'll come back at the end of the year. Highly unlikely. We've got to factor that into our power rankings. We've got the trade of Vernon Adams to BC from Montreal. That obviously will affect BC in some ways. This is an interesting one. I'm really curious to see what your numbers are. So let's go through this as we always do, starting from 9, working our way to 1. Start it off, JB. Who is your number 9 team in our midway power rankings?
Hamilton has climbed out of the basement in my power ranking slightly. I'm going to have to go with our I had suggested last week that Ottawa and Edmonton just play each other for the rest of the year. I thought that would be entertaining for them, entertaining for the fans. They fought each other for the last spot. I'm going to give it to Edmonton, who are last in more categories than Ottawa is. So Edmonton, you are number 9.
They're my number 9 as well. I'm doing it less about statistics and more just eye test. If I absolutely needed a win, they are the team that I would want to play. They're the worst football team. They have won a few games here and there, and they beat Ottawa at home. They beat Hamilton in Hamilton. They have some wins, not in their own stadium, but elsewhere. And they played Winnipeg really tough, but week to week, they're the worst football team in the league. Now, we've seen far worse football teams. One of them may have been in Toronto in 2019. So having them as the bottom of the league isn't necessarily a bad thing for the league. There's some promising things that you see out of Edmonton week to week. But yeah, they're number 9.
The Edmonton story is really, as a CFL fan, is sad. This is a pillar, primary franchise of this league. And for them to be really terrible a couple of years in a row and they can't win at home and nobody goes to the games, it's terrible to see.
It's the not winning at home that does it for me. And I even feel bad for Ottawa that way too, because, and it's almost, in some ways it's worse for Ottawa because they did have people coming out. They had so much support for that terrible team that we saw in 2019 and the terrible team we saw last year. And people have just stopped now. And you hate to see that because there's such great crowds in Ottawa. Young fans, the kind of fans that people say the CFL doesn't have. Well, they do have them in Ottawa, or they did, but you just can't spend 2 years going to games and not seeing a win. And you're seeing this like the storied franchise in Edmonton. It just I hope both of those organizations are able to put together a couple of home wins down the stretch here because their fans deserve it. Certainly the Elks fans, the Red Blacks fans.
You have Ottawa at 8?
I don't actually.
What?
I have Hamilton at 8.
Oh my God.
And I'll explain to you why. We have seen a lot of Hamilton over the last few weeks. We're going to see a little bit more of them this week. Hamilton, spoiler alert for my picks later, I think Hamilton's going to win this week. But I don't think you can count Labor Day as real because it's not real. There's a weird mystique to it. I don't really understand it, and I'll get more into that later. They really go out of their way to lose football games. And the way that they're banged up, you start looking around at that team. I actually liked what I saw. Like, Ottawa's moving in a positive direction. I liked their game last week. I thought they played really well. I thought Arbuckle put together a good game. I thought he certainly showed promise and is moving in the right direction. That team is moving in the right direction. What direction is Hamilton moving in? I don't even, like, it's backwards at quite a high speed. I just think right now I'm more afraid of Ottawa than Hamilton. Now, I know, like I said, I expect Toronto to go in and lose in Hamilton this week, but I think Ottawa right now is playing like a better football team. So Hamilton is my 8.
No, I love it. I have Ottawa at 8. I think that Ottawa is still... I know they beat the Argos in a game that I hope does not come back to haunt. Ottawa is not good at football. And I know that they seem okay when they play Edmonton in the bottom bowl that those two teams, compete in. But I don't, look, maybe Arbuckle flashes and, they start to come along. I agree they have some talent on that team, but I would not pick Ottawa over Hamilton at this point. But we'll see.
So is Hamilton your 7?
Yeah, Hamilton 7. again, another coin flip between Hamilton and Montreal. But I think with Hamilton's uncertainty at quarterback, and they've got some injuries, and to heck with those guys. If I can call them the number 7 team, I will. They're not. We watch them. They don't run particularly well. Dunbar's a nice player. They have some good guys on defense, but they're not a team that scares you. I think it's very hard to blow a Grey Cup and just come back and play the next season. So it doesn't surprise me that they're having a hard time being at the same level.
Imagine how hard it is to blow several Grey Cups and come back,
right.
Which is maybe what we're seeing. It wears, right? It wears at you. So we got the same bottom 3, just in different order. And I feel like that's a tier. Like, I feel Ottawa, Hamilton, Edmonton. You mentioned Montreal. Considering that, I don't think...
No, we have different tiers. I have Edmonton and Ottawa on an island by themselves, and then I have Hamilton, Montreal, and Toronto in a tier. 'Cause I honestly think... I think Hamilton, Montreal, and Toronto are pretty interchangeable. I think Toronto is the best of the 3 at their best, but you look statistically, they're almost identical teams in their strengths and their weaknesses. I have them as a tier if we were to tier it.
So my number 6 is Montreal. And I think this season could have been so much different for them. It's taken them so long to adjust to not having Stanback, who they lost in the opener. And they really haven't recovered from there. I don't think a lot of their defense, their offense is inconsistent. Sometimes it's great. And, they did beat Winnipeg. They can put amazing games together. And that's why they're not in the bottom tier for me. But it's just such an inconsistent effort. They're all over the place. I'm not really scared of them. They're certainly more dangerous than Ottawa, Hamilton, and Edmonton in my mind, but they belong at 6. I feel really confident in that one.
Yeah, they're better than Hamilton. They've won 2 games against the West. Hamilton hasn't won anything against the West. I think Montreal is still very good at home. I think they're a dangerous team, more dangerous than Hamilton, but also deeply flawed. I have Montreal at 6 as well. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what to make of them. I think if you play them, it's going to be a good game and a coin flip at the end.
Who's your 5?
Number 5, I am going to bring in one Western team. I thought it was all too much to have no Western teams. At number 5, I have, falling down my chart, I have Saskatchewan.
Yeah, same with me.
I feel like Saskatchewan, look, they signed a couple of guys who are going to be really good, I think, as receiver. And they still have the core team I thought was number 1 overall. But just time and time again, they haven't put in great performances, especially at home, which has been really surprising. Fajardo, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know whether the pressure. I don't know what happened to that team. I mean, I guess they lost 2 games to the Argos and just kind of lost sight of the plot.
Well, but they didn't. They didn't look like themselves in those games at all. Well, one of the games was they were COVID stricken, but the game where they were,
I think the
somewhat
Acadia
healthy,
game broke them. I was there, man. That game was bonkers. And to lose that game on the pick, I don't know. It definitely seemed to tailspin them.
I feel like they could turn a corner here. They've got back-to-backs coming up with Winnipeg here, which are going to be really interesting. And if they can split that home and home, the Banjo Bowl, if they can find a way to win it this weekend, maybe they find something, because like you said, they've got, bringing some guys back, signing a couple receivers that really should be difference makers on a team that has a lot of skill positions. And, when Morrow eventually comes back, Fajardo finds his groove, they find some way to pass protect and play as an offensive line. Like we said at the beginning of the year, they should be a good team. So they're 5 right now. I don't expect them to go any lower than that. I think if they move from 5, it will be up.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But, I can't have them ahead of the Argos. The Argos beat them twice. I don't care who lined up for them.
Now, the way you're speaking makes me think you have Argos 4. I did for a while. I've been going back and forth on this all day. I ended up putting BC at 4. And I thought, so initially, if Rourke were still healthy, BC would be either 1 or 2. There's no question about that. They are such a different team, like we saw last week without Nathan Rourke. He's such a special quarterback, and you see in the way they played how important a quarterback is, and why teams are so desperate to find a quarterback that that can play at that sort of level, because it is such a massive difference maker when you go from a star to even a good quarterback. And I'm not saying anything bad about Michael O'Connor. I actually kind of like the depth at quarterback that BC's got, even more so now with Vernon Adams coming in. So initially when I heard about the Vernon Adams trade, I was thinking, well, that's it. BC's going to be back in the picture now. But we have to remember that, right or wrong, Vernon Adams wasn't playing. He wasn't really addressing. I know there's a lot going on there, but it's not like they're bringing in the best that Vernon Adams has been. Now, I think he's going to look good in BC. He's got a lot of weapons to work with, but he's not a perfect quarterback either. He hasn't been perfect. He makes mistakes, and he's not Nathan Rourke. And if he comes in there and people expect him to be the same, I think they're going to be disappointed. So if I've got Nathan Rourke's led BC Lions at 2, then to me, I think Adams has to drop them at least 2 places. So I've got them at 4, which is still good. They're still going to be, this has saved their season. This gives them a chance again. But I think 4 until we see how this goes.
Yeah, the Vernon Adams trade really affected my power rankings as well. I have Toronto at 4. Which is, I think, is the right place for them. Toronto at its peak, I think, can ball with anybody except for maximum power BC Lions, but that I don't think that's going to come around again. I think Toronto, look, they're still the leaders in the East. They are in games. They don't get blown out. They played Winnipeg tough. They played Calgary tough. They are up and down. But still, in that Grey Cup conversation for me, I have the Argos at 4.
And is BC 3?
No.
Interesting. Yeah, all right. So you did see some movement there.
I have Calgary at 3. I mean, I know they just beat Toronto, and I know they're missing players, and I know you love Calgary, but I don't know. I watched them. Certainly nothing blew me away. I think Calgary is good. Look, I have them top 3. I think they are top 3. When they get the running back, and they're a winning franchise. They know how to win. They're going to be a tough playoff out for somebody in the West. I wouldn't necessarily want to play them, but I don't think they are as good as BC with Vernon Adams. I think that roster is loaded, and as long as he can keep that car between the ditches, I think BC is still the better team than Calgary.
So I've got Toronto at 3 for pretty much all the reasons you named. I think they can play with anyone in the West. I think they can play with anyone in the league. I think they are the best team in the East, and I think they can play with anyone in the West. We've seen them take out Saskatchewan a couple of times. Edmonton is not really in the conversation. And yeah, they played really tight. Remember, a missed convert to lose to Winnipeg, really tight with Calgary, and they're not playing the same BC team they got blown out by ever again. So I think they belong at 3 for me. And my 2 is Calgary. And I'll just add in some things that you touched on. I do think they've got skill, not to go head to head with BC, but I think they do at the quarterback position now, and that is going to make a difference. And guys are getting healthy, getting Thurman back and getting Kadeem Carey back. It's going to be a very different Calgary team. Those losses to Winnipeg took a lot out of. You can only imagine having to play Winnipeg when Winnipeg is on. 3 games against Winnipeg, that is just rough, and so that's going to take it out of any team. But take that away. If there was a team that I was going to choose to beat Winnipeg one game at this stage of the season, it would be Calgary. And so that's why I've got them 2.
Yeah, I would not be surprised at all if they're in the Western Final.
So who's your 2 then? That's got to be BC.
Yeah, BC. I have BC at 2. Yeah, I think that that roster is, everybody is pretty healthy, and that, look, that roster is loaded. Defensively they're not overwhelming. I will grant you that, and that might be a problem come the playoffs. But this is not a playoff ranking. This is a regular season power ranking, and I would say they have more than enough juice to be number 2.
And we don't even need to say anything at all about number 1. Everyone knows Winnipeg is the best. They're number 1 on everybody's power rankings, especially now. And yeah, you don't really need to back it up. They're the best team. Just hands down, they are the best team in the CFL.
But still beatable. I know they're very frustrating because they're that kind of team where you can almost beat them and then you lose to them. But they're not, I think that's what's exciting about this year. I would put those top 4 teams. I think any of those 4 teams could beat each other in a playoff game.
Yeah, well, we saw Montreal beat Winnipeg in Winnipeg. You saw Toronto come within a point. Calgary played them tight. So they're not invincible. And this is we've seen better Winnipeg Blue Bomber teams or more dominant Winnipeg Blue Bomber teams. But yeah, they're unquestionably number 1. All right, JB, let's turn our attention to round 4 of Hamilton-Toronto as we get everybody set for the Labor Day Classic. This game is, as I was saying before, this is not a normal football game. Hamilton on Labor Day is like Whoville at Christmas. It's like everything just stops and it just sort of becomes its own thing. It doesn't matter how bad Hamilton is or how good Toronto is. Every year, this is a disaster for the Argos. They go walking into this ambush regardless of what's going on in the season for either team. They're 13, 37, and 1, I think, historically on Labor Day in Hamilton. It's just different for them, and that is going to affect a lot of our conversation about this game and how we prepare for it.
It's a huge game. If they can win this game, I think that puts them. Well, I think it does put them in the driver's seat for the Eastern title.
It does. But it's a big if.
Yeah, I mean, if you can go up, depending on what happens in the Montreal game, but if you could potentially go up, 2 wins on Montreal, I just think it's going to be hard for Montreal to catch up after that. They play head to head, but Toronto would have to go on like a 4-game losing streak to give that up, and it would certainly finally put the rest Hamilton. So I think when you have a chance to put a dagger in your opponent, this is it. Then it's just Montreal and Toronto for the second half of the season, and Hamilton is at home watching on TV because it's over. If Hamilton loses this game, they are donezo.
Let's look at the injury report. Hamilton's injury report doesn't have too much going on. It's mostly good news for them. Dan Evans was practicing full today after resting his shoulder yesterday and actually earlier in their walkthroughs this week as well. Looks like they might get Chris Van Zyl back. He practiced full both yesterday and today. Other than that, we know Matthew Schultz is going to be out for a while. Jamie Newman is back and healthy, so it's probably going to be Evans and Newman as the 2 QBs dressed, assuming they only dress 2. They've got a lot of guys still out and are going to be for a while, and that's their injury news has sort of already happened, right? That's Simone Lawrence, Evans, Jake Birch, Addison. Like those are, Lawrence Woods too. Like they've got a bunch of guys that have impacted them already. But in terms of guys they weren't sure about for this week, I think it's going to be most of them coming back. The Argos a little bit of a different story. I'm hoping that a lot of the guys that were out today were more veteran rest days. So you saw, a couple of concerning limiteds, like Darius Bladek being limited is makes you a little bit nervous, but I think he's going to play. I think we can expect the O-line to go out as they've gone out. So I'm not too concerned there. The 2 positions I am a little worried about. One is DB. So you got Tavares McFadden, who didn't practice today with a hamstring injury. That worries me only because he's not a veteran. This isn't a veteran rest day, so you can just say, oh yeah, they're probably just taking it easy with him. DBs with hamstring issues, especially fast DBs, guys that are known for their speed, with hamstring issues, that it does worry me. So we'll have to monitor that over the next couple of days. And Robert Priester was not practicing today, so that is also a concern. And then the third DB is Caleb Holden. So again, both Priester and Holden, who had been expected to provide some depth for halfbacks, not practicing. So hopefully Carnell, who doesn't appear on the injury report, can go and is problem free in this game, because otherwise it could get a bit nerve wracking. But yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is right now at corner if McFadden can't go. So yeah, fingers crossed that he can. The other area of concern, a little bit wide receiver. I don't know what to do with this. I've never seen a thorax injury posted on an injury report. Tavares Daniels did not practice today with thorax listed on the injury report. I don't know what to do with that. I didn't notice any sort of injury occur to his thorax. I've never even used thorax in describing a human being. Isn't that usually like an insect term, like the social insects, like bees and termites and ants, where you talk about thorax?
Is it involving your throat?
I think it's like, yeah, I think thorax is like, it's sort of like upper rib cage area. Isn't that like, the between your, I think it's between your throat and like the bottom of your rib cage in that sort of region. But it's not like chest. So I don't know how you hurt your thorax, but that's what makes me worry. Like, I know what everything else is. I know, okay, he's got ankle, he's got a knee, he's got, a thorax. So let's see what happens. Hopefully this is more of a rest day than anything else, so he can get his thorax right and is going to be good to go tomorrow. But yeah, I didn't know what to do with that one. So a little concerned about that. But the good news on the receiver side is that Tommy Neild was able to go full. Now, if you're looking for one other area of concern, it would be running back, because you've still got Declan Cross and Joe Carbone not practicing, and I expect them both to be out again this week. And Javon Leake didn't practice with a hamstring injury. So you've really just got Ouellette and Adeboboye in the backfield, and that's it. No other running backs, no other fullbacks. And I think that's what they're going to go to war with on Monday. I think that's going to be it. They're going to dress two running backs. It's going to be those two guys. No fullbacks to speak of. And that just makes me a little bit nervous when you don't have any depth, because we've seen running backs go down. It's a position where there are injuries, and Ouellette doesn't, he looks like he's taken a number of hits. He's dished some out as well, but I don't think he's 100% right now either. And Adeboboye is a rookie, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, if you're looking for reasons to be nervous, I think I've outlined them pretty well there. It's time for OCDC. JB, we'll start it off with you. You are the defensive coordinator for the hometown Hamilton Tiger Cats this week. How are you stopping the Argos?
I'm looking to take away the pass. I'm not worried at all about run. I think that we can take care of run just playing straight up ball. Lots of DBs on the field. I definitely want to try and speed up McLeod. You can't let him get into a rhythm like a lot of quarterbacks, but especially he has a feel when he's on. Speed him up early. DBs all over the field, 7 DBs, tight man coverage. Maybe with a robber underneath. Tighter man coverage than what they played before. I think that's been the book on Toronto. Can these guys get off press? Can they get open when a 4-man rush is putting pressure on him? And I don't know if Hamilton really stuck to it enough. I don't know whether they think they have the DBs to play it, but in a vacuum, that's what I try and do. I try and go, man, I want to stay away from zone. I think McLeod is very good at breaking down zone. He's a smart guy. He studies a lot of film. Tight man coverage, 7 DBs, pressure the quarterback. None of that is rocket surgery, but that is definitely what I'm bringing.
My film piece this week is on the Argos' success against man coverage last week, and I am a little worried. You'll have to watch that film piece, but I am a little worried that it's something that's a little bit more difficult to duplicate than I was hoping when I started to dive into that topic. So in terms of the Hamilton offense, I think I really want to simplify it for Dane Evans this week just to get his confidence back. We know the Argos don't play a lot of man. We talked about that. I really want to break things down where we go all the way back to the beginning just to get him comfortable and get him started. Let's go with one read. Simple things. Watch the corner. Corner does this, you do this. Corner does this, you do this. We're talking half field. This is really basic for a quarterback of Dane Evans' experience, but you just need to get him. He doesn't look like his normal self out there. And he's a guy that typically has exuded confidence throughout his career, and you don't see that in him. So let's build that up. Short passes. We're going to get Jackson involved as well. Like, Jackson had 16 touches last week, which is pretty good. I think it's got to be 20. Van Zyle's going to help that as well. But you can start passing with him as well. Not just the one read looks that I was talking about to receivers, but involving him in different ways. Obviously, the Argos have seen enough screens. They're going to be on those. But you can involve Jackson in running draw plays. You can run shovel passes. Those are nice confidence builders, things that will both help out Evans and get Don Jackson some more touches. So that's how I'm going to focus the offense this week. Simple reads for Evans. Let's go with very basic concepts. Get him some confidence, throw some accurate footballs, have him worrying about one guy instead of trying to read a whole field, which he can do and he can get back to. But right now, that's just not what he needs, especially early. If there's an early turnover in this game, I think that could be death for his confidence. So it's all based around keeping Dane Evans' stat sheet clean this week. Toronto's defense. JB, let's do the good guys here. What are you planning defensively for the Argos?
I'm sure they're going to run out different looks in terms of, running some Wildcat stuff. So be ready for Wildcat for sure. Be ready to run blitz when you get a Wildcat look. He's a load, and they're definitely going to try and throw that wrinkle. But I'm happy with Dane Evans throwing into our zone defense. Keep him in the pocket. Don't worry about sacking him. Just keep him in the pocket. Make him throw that ball to a receiver in the zone, and then if you have 6-7 DBs out there, go get it. And I think you can get in his head. He is a quarterback who can get very streaky, as we saw last year in the playoffs, and he'll be at home. But I mean, in this crowd, much like I talked about, like Hamilton, Toronto, Montreal are all the same team. If my man Evans throws a pick in the first quarter, okay, it's going to be off in Hamilton. It is not going to be the Lion King. It's going to be booze raining down. So I think that's crucial. If you can get to him early, get a pick early, get a fumble early, that crowd is going to turn on him like a rabid hyena.
Period.
So I'm looking to get, and I'm not worried. Again, I'm not worried about the running back. My big thing is just take away the Jackson stuff out of the backfield, like the releasing out of the backfield. I hate that stuff. He likes to do that. It's a confidence builder. Take that away. The way they took away Ouellette running those routes, stay all over him. Don't give him. I know we play the bend don't break, but I would really try and ride that running back out of the backfield and take that immediate safety blanket away.
For Toronto's offense, let's focus on the run game first. I actually want to target Hauser. He's a really good player, but I was just noticing these last few weeks, and this is what you get to see when you see Hamilton so often. You see one team so many times. They love dropping him into coverage on second down plays. They really like that. So if you're looking at any second down runs, you run right at Hauser, anticipating that he's going to be bailing in coverage, because he will. They send him back there so much. He's really good at it, and it's surprising. It's been so effective because you see this hulking defensive lineman, and you don't really think about him in coverage. But he gets 30 yards downfield sometimes. He's picked off Nathan Rourke on one of those plays. He almost picked off McLeod Bethel-Thompson earlier in the season. And so capitalize on that. If they're going to bail him out that often, target him in the run game. I also want to see more misdirection. We got a little bit of it last week. We got the Banks end around that you celebrated. More of that stuff. You've got to have the linebackers guessing, especially without Simone Lawrence there. You've got to capitalize on that. They weren't able to take advantage of Kyle Wilson too much last week. He actually played a pretty good game. And it was one of the guys they were trying to target. That didn't really work. So let's try misdirection just to see if that will work on Wilson this week. The other guys that the Argos tried to pick on, Rodney Randall Jr., Carriel Brooks got picked on pretty successfully, actually. Davaris Daniels had a really nice game against him, and Brooks is a great DB, so it's tough to repeat. But with both of those guys, you take Randall Jr. and Brooks, and you look at what worked against them, and they're watching a long week of film, these same routes again and again, seeing how they got beat by Coxie and by Daniels, and now you have to sort of play off that. So this is where we bring in some double moves from Davaris Daniels, kind of like, you remember the touchdown against BC last year at BMO Field. Davaris Daniels had a beautiful double move on that from the inside, from the slot. Plays like that. Ambles had one this past week that I thought was really good for his touchdown. Those are great slot back double moves, and I think we can take advantage of Carriel Brooks that way. And with Randall Jr., it's a little bit the opposite. He got burned deep by Coxie, so now is when you bring in those outside release comebacks, those deep comebacks, and I think you're going to catch him continuing downfield. And then the last thing is, if you're going to try and beat Kyle Wilson this week, and he's beatable, he's not Simone Lawrence. He's in for Simone Lawrence, but he's not the same level of player. It's as well as he played, it's still a drop-off. He had Ouellette shut down pretty well in the pass game last week. They didn't have a single target or completion to Ouellette. And so now we've got to have variations of the routes that he was running. So instead of running flats and swings, I want wheel routes and Texas routes or diamond routes, and see if you can't catch Wilson overcompensating for the flats and the swings. One thing, JB, what is your one thing this week?
Well, I want to say my one thing is to win a damn Labor Day game.
that could be enough.
But I'll get a little more micro. I thought Ouellette looked nice. I want to see 100 total yards from him, passing and running.
My one thing's also Ouellette related. I want to see 5 receptions for Ouellette on the day.
You can't have your one thing be Ouellette as well.
Well, it is. That's what my one thing is. We both want to see something from Ouellette. You want to see, 100 total yards?
I guess we should have talked about this prior to the pod.
That's more exciting when we don't. Although sometimes this happens.
100 yards from the line of scrimmage.
All right, and I want 5 receptions. All right, Ouellette, it is all on you this week.
Yeah, I think it has to be.
One thing.
I don't need 100 yards. Give me 40 yards running and 60 yards passing, and we win the game.
I'll do my prediction first, just in case yours is the exact same for the second week in a row. I've got Hamilton winning this. If I just landed on this planet last week and I watched that game, Argos Ticats, I would say the Argos are going to win this week. They looked so much like the better team. They are the better team. Labor Day is just different. Hamilton wins 34-22. Nothing makes sense, but then everything returns to normal the following week.
Toronto is about to go on the road. They've played 7 games at home out of their first 10. Considering Halifax at home, it's going to be a challenge the second half of the season. I think this game is one of those games you have to circle, and not all right. We'll come back to it later. Like, no, win this game, put a dagger in Hamilton. Give yourself a little breathing room. Go out, take care of business versus Ottawa next week. I think this is the game. This is the season. So I have the Argos winning 28-26.
All right. Well, I hope you are right, not me. I don't see it. Labor Day. It's time for our world famous fantasy advice, JB. We had a rough week last week, and apologies if we cost you a win in your league or a terrible week. We didn't do well. We ended up in the 60s, I think. We pulled out a win somehow in our league. We're still in second place, 8-3. But it was pretty dicey. We got lucky. We ended up playing against a team that produced the worst fantasy output in the league last week, so that worked for us. And this week we're playing one of the guys from 2 and Out. So we've got to pull it together and make sure we're on point. We return to putting near 100 or over 100 numbers. So let me run through it here. A couple Stampeders in this because Stampeders are playing Edmonton. So we are going a little bit Calgary heavy. We've got Jake Mayer, 8,080 at quarterback. Kadeem Carey in the backfield, 8,471. I think he's going to have a really nice day. And I like Frankie Hickson as our other running back. I know it's against Winnipeg, but I just think that price for what he can do, 4,148. I'm not expecting a huge day from him. I don't really see that for him. But if he can even get 8 points, 7-8 points, I'm fine with that with what you're spending. We save a little bit of money on our receivers because we've got Dalton Schoen, who's at 6,220. We love Schoen. He needs to have a big week after kind of disappearing a little bit. And DeMonte Coxie, who had a pretty big week last week, but he's at 2,500. That's great value for not just a starting wide receiver, but a starting wide receiver that is starting to have a connection with his quarterback like we saw with MBT last week. So we like Coxie and Schoen at wide receiver. That leaves Devaris Daniels for our flex. So you're looking for ideally a touchdown from both of those guys, Coxie and Daniels. But even if one of them gets the yards, one of them finds the end zone, I'm fine with that. We know how Devaris plays so well against Hamilton. He seems always to find a way to get a touchdown against them. So we're hoping for that again this week. 7,340 for Daniels. And that leaves our defense, the Montreal Alouettes, 3,200. They're at home. They're against Ottawa. It just seems like the perfect recipe for fantasy defense. All right, JB, it is probably time for what I would guess is your least favorite segment now, where we make our picks.
Well, I feel like I've been a bit snake bit with, guys that I've picked and things that have happened in these games. But yeah, I'm ready to love again.
You're over 500 at least. You're 25-22.
Ooh, Eastern leading.
Yeah, you are the East. I am Winnipeg at 32-15.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's go through it. So Ottawa at Montreal. I'll go first. So Ottawa at Montreal. I've got Ottawa. I think this is going to be an upset. I think the Red Blacks.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be fantastic. I would love that. I like Montreal at home. I'm not a Arbuckle guy. I think Montreal takes care of business at home. But that'd be great if they didn't.
Winnipeg at Saskatchewan. I have a feeling we're going to be different on. We might be different on 3 of the 4 of these. I've got Saskatchewan at home against Winnipeg. I think this is it. They're against the wall here. They've got to answer. Their season could very easily fall apart over the next 2 weeks if it hasn't already. They've got to win this one. You don't want to lose this one and then go into Winnipeg. Saskatchewan wins at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Winnipeg. I'm not going to bet against Winnipeg.
Yeah, it's probably smart, but I see it another way. So I've taken Hamilton. You've taken Toronto. Where are you going? The Calgary or on the Edmonton at Calgary game?
I mean, I guess it's possible that that Calgary looks past this game, but they play Edmonton again next week. So, what are they looking past to another good time? I think Calgary wins. Calgary's about to go on a winning streak. I like Calgary here.
Yeah, I like Calgary too. So yeah, we got 3 different picks though, so that could move the table a little bit. But right now, it looks like you are going to be buying me a submarine sandwich.
No, this could be a big turnaround week for me. It's moving week, and we're ready.
Well, that will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Hope you enjoy the Labor Day Monday game. Hopefully, it is not like every one of the past 51 of them. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the fight.